What is the most traumatizing event that you witnessed while you were a kid? My parents' suicide attempt, mostly because hours before it happened, I knew in my gut something horrible would happen that night. Hours of screaming that all I did was bring on pain, that I was ungrateful. I was 10. 15 years later I'm still being told the same things from this person, so I finally decided that it's not my responsibility anymore. I saw one of my best friends die in front of me and our other best friend, T. He was 12. I was 8. We were at a school football match. He complained to our headmaster that his chest felt tight. My friend had asthma and occasionally got that tightness. He took a puff of his inhaler, walked a few steps, then collapsed. My headmaster caught him. My friend was blue. He died a few feet away from me, in my headmaster's arms. STDS. Sudden Teenage Death Syndrome. 10 years later, my other best friend, T, also died, a few hours after I had last spoken to him. They're buried beside each other. I'll start with this: my childhood was bad. Not the worst in any way, and I know many people personally who had it far worse. It's horrible to think people have it worse, and even I live in a first world nation, so that gives me a pretty good advantage overall. However, I digress. Nonetheless, I feel like sharing stories of these events may help me and maybe others gather a sense of unity, maybe not. I'm not a therapist and likely couldn't be. Also, this story is about a child receiving serious injury, so if that is something you aren't good with, feel free to skip over. Just a warning, also this is a lengthy one. DL, Dr. Below. My little brother, affectionately known as Bro from here on out, is just under 2 years younger than I am. Growing up wasn't the easiest with a single bipolar mom on disability. We didn't have a whole lot of money, and Mom isn't a person with a clean track record of addiction. All of this left us with little. Enough, but little. Now, for a large period of my early childhood, Mom was clean, on medications that made her zombie-like, but at least she didn't yell at us, so that was nice. We went to church and became Christian. I use this term loosely as it took me several years to properly convert. Can't say for Bro, but I don't think he really bought it for a while either, but he was 3-ish when we started going to church, so he was quite young to be holding a proper belief system, but that's my opinion. Through our church, Mom met a guy that I will call Bob. Bob was a nice English man who moved to my country some time ago, I never exactly learned when. He was planning on building his own dream house, and was skilled enough to do so and had somehow acquired a place to start doing so. I assume he was renting the lot from the farm it was on. I was a kid, so I didn't care what the means of doing so was. The guy was building his own house and I found that cool enough. While Bob's house was ready to live in, it was still unfinished and very dangerous, especially upstairs. These stairs were meant to be a spiral staircase eventually, but until then a mock staircase had been erected in its place. It was a line of 35 degrees downward lilted leaning staircase of Pisa and made no sense. Also, the second floor landing didn't have any form of railing or safeguard for falling 10 feet straight down onto the plyboard floor that had yet to be hardwooded. Thank whatever you want for that. For some reason, one I couldn't and still cannot fathom as an adult, Bro and I were allowed up here and were encouraged to do so while Bible study or whatever boring adult thing was going on, because there was a Wii up there. Now, for reference, I was 9 at this point, Bro was 7. We played the shit out of that system. Got so into it Wii Sports boxing matches had us jumping around as we clashed in a virtual world that felt almost tangible. This, of course, would leave us thirsty, and at one point it was Bro's turn to get the sodas from downstairs. I sat on the couch and watched as he went to do the only sane way to descend those stairs. Slide down on your ass. Then I see him start falling sideways, to his left. I knew instantly, faster than I knew I could think, something was horribly wrong. I knew the drop that awaited him. I still vividly have a frame in my mind, a still image, of his right hand being the last thing I see before he is gone. And then I heard it. It brings me to tears every time I remember that ungodly sound. Just a raw, unrelenting thud louder than I ever expected would come from a falling body. Followed by a second smaller clump, after he comes to a full stop after bouncing off of the floor. Although I didn't see it happen, I know that is the case. I know what I heard. I was sprinting towards the edge of the landing, sliding about a foot after almost diving to get a look. I had to know if he was okay. I knew he wasn't. He didn't even scream. Another memory, this time video, that is eternally ingrained in me is Mom and Bob running towards the scene and knocking into each other, whereupon Mom shoved Bob away and went to Bro. I vaguely remember screaming Bro's name. I don't remember descending the stairs, but I did shortly, I assume, and rushed to be there with Bro. who was staring nowhere with his eyes wide open and was unresponsive. No one moved him for fear of making things worse by paralyzing him. I honestly thought he was dead. Nothing in hell or earth could prepare me for what happened next, and I am unsure the amount of time he was unconscious for. The first thing we all noticed from him was the loudest and most ear-piercing scream of pure terror and primal fear. It lasted an agonizing amount of time, drilling into my very core. He also began to grasp at Mum's hair, tearing it out in clumps with no real awareness of what he is doing. All the while she lightly braces his head so he doesn't move it, and I try to control his arms to prevent him wiggling himself around. It wasn't what a seizure looked like in my mind, it was more like he was trying to move normally but his control was turned up so he would just flail, and on top of this it was only his arms. After another unknown span of time to me, his behavior changed. He calmed down, becoming somewhat lucid but just barely. He kept asking if he could lay down even though he was doing exactly that. This is something that still chills me for some reason. How can someone be so out of it they couldn't tell they weren't standing up? Mum told him not to move and that he would be alright soon. None of us were sure of his exact condition, if he was dying, and if so how long would he have before he was unsavable? As is thematic in the story, I don't know how long it took the ambulance. Nor did I know who called 911 or when, although I know it was pretty quickly. The ambulance's arrival sparked hope into our heart, no matter how fragile. They rushed in and I immediately back away, knowing I am of no more helpful use. And watch as the EMS examine him quickly and ask him questions, as he has transitioned into a much more coherent state at this point, but still not normal. They carefully placed him on the little stretcher, and one of them, who I wish I can thank in person one day, looked at me in my crying, dismantled state of shock and fear and said that he needed the big brother to help him go get the gurney from the ambulance while his partner stayed with Bro and Mum. I immediately pulled myself together to the best of my ability and followed him. I can't remember what we talked about, but he was able to calm me down a decent amount and I helped take the gurney in with him. The EMSs thanked me for my help after placing Bro on the gurney and start wheeling him out. Mum doesn't allow me in the ambulance and I was to stay the night at our other church friend's house, a lovely upper middle-aged couple who I knew very well and I had slept at their house before. I don't remember the ambulance pulling away visually, just the sirens. I get mini panic attacks to this day when an ambulance passes by when I'm walking somewhere, and I only noticed this years later after moving to a city after acquiring an estate for rural life. I also can't remember whether I went to school the day after, and it is a more likely possibility than you might think. This night for me exists now in short stints of very vivid memory, separated by many periods of nothing that I don't remember, and cause the night to have no sense of time for me. I finally found out that Bro was relatively okay the next morning. He had broken his left collarbone, second time doing so, and suffered a brain injury. His learning level dropped to that of a kindergartner, or 2 full years of schooling. Luckily he retained most of his functions, however, and aside from his learning and concentration abilities, and he made a swift recovery. Unfortunately he was pushed through elementary school at a standard pace and was unable to catch up for a long time. Now he is doing pretty good, and is on track to getting his high school diploma. He is a bit of a dumbass but in personality rather than actual intelligence, and I can confidently say he is a smart kid, despite everything, and is a blast to hang out with even if he might become the next Steve O in 5 years. So that is my story. I know it will likely be tame compared to what most stories in this thread that will end up being, and hope this was a good first post to Reddit. DL, Doctor, little brother fell 10 feet and suffered brain damage. What his actions were after the fall have haunted me for the rest of my life. Edit, Gold. Thank you kindly, stranger. First Reddit post in this got far more replies than I expected. Some of the stuff in this thread is pretty messed up, and I give my best to all of you who I can't comment back to directly. No matter how bad things were /get, I know you can make it. Love from Canada. Children taking their last breath. My brother was born with complicated heart problems, and when he was in the hospital we stayed at the intensive care unit, and where a child passed away every month or so, and some of them shared the room with my brother. When I was 6 or 7, I was walking home from school with my dad. It had been raining all day, and people don't know how to drive in rain in Arizona. This guy comes flying down the road and tries braking, but his tires turn towards us. Luckily, he was going too fast to really make a difference. He rear-ends a guy at the stoplight and flies out the windshield. I saw him slide forward on his face at least 20 feet. I'm pretty sure that he died. A neighbor kid had a mama cat who had kittens, and the boy grabbed one of the kittens by the body and proceeded to bash the poor thing's head on the ground over and over until it died. I was 7 and stopped hanging out with the kid. Someone that my family trusted enough to watch over me, 3, female, and my cousin, 6. Male, taught my cousin how to rape me. My cousin lived with my family until he turned 12 and moved back with his mom. By then he had sexually abused me several times and I never told anyone until I learned what rape and sexual assault was. Turns out he also abused my even younger sister. It's never too early to teach children about improper behavior. I found my mom's dildo, took it and hid it, try and figure out what it was. Scrolling this thread, I feel stupid for saying probably the movie 2012. Couldn't sleep the night after I watched it. I am a very sheltered person. When I was 3/4, I watched my mother's boyfriend force my 2-year-old sister to give him oral. He also sexually assaulted me during this time. Bad man. Our mother didn't believe us until he got caught doing it to his own child around 15-16 years later. He's not in prison. Never got convicted. Watching a cop gun down a teen on the sidewalk in Stuyvesant back in like 2014 or so. When a week went by and nothing showed up on the news, I realized they got away with it. Seeing a repeat of this behavior on a macro scale is legitimately horrifying. Hyperbole and apathy be damned. Nothing that bad, I guess. I saw a lady fall and crack her head open when I was little and went with my mom to run errands. Pretty sure she might have died, but who knows. Trigger, hurt children. In the late 80s I went with my mom to her friend's house. I was 8 at the oldest. On the way home we had to drive on the divided road that had a speed limit of 70 miles per hour. On the road going the opposite direction we saw a truck flipped over and something laying on the roadway. My mom stopped to try and help because EMS wasn't there yet. I had to stay in the car. I watched and saw them hand my mom a baby. She later told me she had to pick glass out of the baby's head. There were 2 other children laying on the road, they were both younger than I was at the time. I saw the baby's car seat upside down on the road also. I never saw the kids move. I don't know where the mom was during all this. She was probably there but I don't remember. The truck they were in was a little Chevy S10 size, so should only fit 3 people at the most. The baby was in the car seat but the car seat was not strapped in and the other 2 were not in a seatbelt either. We never did find out what happened to those kids. I still think about them sometimes. My mom worked for the State Department and made the decision to move me at age 5 to a Western African country. While it gave me a unique perspective of the world, I saw a lot of refugees who were mutilated from civil unrest. Men, women, and children with hands, arms, and legs missing from machete attacks living on the streets begging for money. I regularly saw a woman missing both hands handle money my family would give her. I have never been okay since seeing this. I have never been able to understand human cruelty or what happened to these people. I watched a child on the back of a motorcycle essentially grinded into dust. It was under a freeway and the rider wasn't going very fast but he lost traction at a crossing with lights where I was in the front passenger seat and the lights were red. It was fairly lightly raining but the asphalt down there was soaked and the bike just came out to the left as it turned right around the roundabout. The rider basically instantly came skidding off the bike and rolled to the side. No vehicles were particularly close to him but a few things skidded to a halt. The kid on the back, however, was strapped into a seat. I don't believe I've ever seen a device like it before that or since. What looked like happened was the wheels of the bike sort of raised themselves as the center of gravity was controlled by the engine sorta toward the top of the vehicle and the little person was essentially smooshed across the tarmac. Sadly, I didn't know what had happened. Our light went green but Dad didn't move. I'm pretty sure it was Dad, anyway. There was an odd kind of quiet to the moment and I remember watching the bike intently. The rider got up and went over to his bike. As he got close to it, he started making erratic movements. He reached down toward the passenger and dropped to his knees, and emitted a noise I can't duplicate in any way, a torturous guttural roar. Despite nearly 20 years of super shit days and a recurring nightmare about being eaten by wolves, that noise still haunts me from time to time.